Shalom, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while since I've been online with a video, whether it be of a teaching or an update about where we are in end time prophecy. And I believe there's some particular reasoning for that, which I'll go into as the video goes on. But I just wanted to come and encourage you today because I've had quite a few messages and emails just asking me how I am, and people haven't heard from me, and some people have found themselves discouraged during this moment because of that silence. Not only from me, but I think generally speaking, there's been less from the community than there has been in previous months. And we're going to talk a bit about that as time goes on during this short video. But I do believe that there is a reason for it, and I do believe that it's something the Most High has inspired. Now, when I go back to around February to March times of this year, so almost 6 months ago or so, I remember having I believe it was a live stream, a teaching where I talked about having an individual relationship with the Most High. And I said, whilst we all have our favorite pastors and our favorite teachers and our favorite people that administer the word to us, there is an emphasis, especially because of the times and seasons that we're in, where we need to have an individual relationship with the Most High, where we go directly to Him as the source, not through another. See, there was times past where we had the likes of Moshe, who would have been what you class as a mediator at that time between Elohim and man. And of course, we know that our Messiah Yahusha, he is the mediator, the only mediator that we now need. But Yahusha is not here physically, he's here in the Ruach. And that same Ruach is the Ruach that allows us to comfortably go in front of the Most High and have a conversation with him, have a relationship with him. And so it's critical that we are getting this understanding. And during the time where we feel there may be some kind of silence, where we feel that there's not a lot of activity going on, we should be having that relationship with the Most High and going to him directly, as the scripture says, boldly going to his throne of grace. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that and how that correlates to where we are today. Because as I said, I did cover before that at the time there was so many things going on in terms of so many different teachings, so many different voices from within the awakening community. And of course, it's a good thing when you can get information and when you can get different teachings and different edification from various sources. But some people were tending to rely on that more than their individual relationship with the Most High. And I had a clear word at that time that my people need to get into my word more. This is what the Most High was leading me to understand, that we need to be seeking him out for ourselves, not through another. And so at the time when this teaching was done, or at least when it was covered, when we spoke about these things, this was something that I was trying to encourage the community to do, and myself included, because one of the things that I said at the time is I said, one of the reasons why I believe the Most High called me to teach and called me to do various things is so that I could be in the word for myself, because there's no way you can come in front of people, in front of congregations, giving messages without you studying, without you having a relationship with him, without you getting the source from him. And so that was an encouragement to me to be able to do these things. But for many people who are not content creators or who are not teaching, they are relying on being fed. And as I say, there's nothing wrong with it to a degree, but ultimately the source has to come from the Most High. So I want to have a look at a piece of scripture, a famous scripture which we find in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And I will start reading from verse 1, where it says, "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die. a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. That's Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through to 8. And so when we look at this piece of scripture, it's very clearly telling us that there are times and seasons, and there are times to do certain things and times to do other things. And as it says in verse 7, that there is a time to speak and a time to keep silent. There are times for every season, and I believe that the Most High from prior, back as I said at the beginning, near the beginning of this year, was encouraging me personally that I need to put out messages to say we need to seek him directly. And that sometimes comes with being silent, because obviously the more noise there is, the more things that are going on, the less likely it is that people will refrain from being distracted. And I believe that sometimes these things, though the purpose may be good, i.e. teachings and edification, the purpose of it is definitely good, but sometimes it can be a distraction to your own individual walk. And so the lack of content, so to speak, wasn't necessarily deliberate. It was just that the Most High hadn't inspired me during this period to come on and give any more teachings. And that's not to say that there weren't things to teach about. There's always things in the word. The word is not a destination, it's a journey. You never get to the end of the word, because there's always something new to learn. So there was definitely things that could have been said and content that could have been put out. But I believe that the Most High was encouraging me. And I don't think it was just me, because even when I look across the community at some of the teachers that I like to listen to and some of the people that give messages, that make content that I like, I even found a reduction in their activity. Some was non-existent, some was a lot less than it had been previously. So I believe that there was a feeling within the community and an inspiration that the Most High put on most people's hearts, that there needs to be a bit of a silence, or there needs to be a time period of less activity to encourage individuals to seek out the Most High for themselves, because he wants individual relationships as well as a correct collective relationship with the nation, with Yahasharal. So these are things that we need to get into an understanding of. Now, of course, there has been so many things going on from the last few months, from politics to war, to rumors of war, to the economy, all the things that we know that the scriptures predicts and foretells. And we also know that we are in a time and season where very interesting things are happening, which will eventually lead to the departure of Yahasharal, the second Exodus, and all the promises that pertain to that. But I believe we've just entered, or we are entering in, or we are exiting. I don't know the exact length of time, but we're in a place where the Most High was encouraging us to be silent and to wait on him and to communicate with him. During that silence, there should have been more seeking out the Most High directly. And I think that that was inspired across the board, as I say, to many different people, so that there can be more of a quiet in the community. But perhaps that period is coming to its end, because we are now still in the midst of summer, but entering into the fall season. And We know, according to the teachings that we've seen before and the feasts and all of these things, we know that this time is going to be a time where many things are going to come to pass. And so now it's a case of seeing those things manifest. And so as we start to enter into the full season and the feasts that come with it, we can start to see how the scriptures are coming alive. But I just wanted to come and do an update as to why there perhaps has been silence, and to encourage you to still be encouraged about your current situation, because the current situation is that the Most High is going to redeem his people. Now, some months ago, somebody asked me about when you look forward to these things and when you start to anticipate what seasons these things may take place in. I was asked the question whether or not you would be left disappointed if these things didn't happen. And I think we have to get an understanding that there's no way I could be disappointed if things don't happen when I think they're going to happen, unless they don't happen at all. So we all have timings and we all have speculation and we all have things that we can see according to what we see in the scripture and the signs of the times and all these things. And sometimes if things don't come to pass in that manner or at that time, it could be perceived that disappointment may kick in. But as I said, you can only be disappointed if you learn that those things are not going to happen at all. So if it's the case that the timing is wrong, but the situation will still occur, then how can you be left disappointed? Because you know that the Most High's timing is perfect. And if you believe something is going to happen today and it doesn't happen until tomorrow, then that's because that's the Most High's timing. He has set the times and seasons to take place. And he doesn't change his mind. He's not fluctuant. One day he thinks it's going to be on this day and the next day he says no, it will be on that day. It's always going to happen at the time it is appointed. And so for you or for me or for anybody to be disappointed when things don't turn out the way you think at that time, it's almost indirectly like you saying, well, I believe my timing is better than the Most High's. And of course we know that that can't be the case. His timing is perfect. He knows why things are going to happen when he says they're going to happen. And so we have to be encouraged that even when timings don't work out, it doesn't mean that the Most High is not going to fulfill his promises. He is always going to fulfill his promises. Scripture always has to be fulfilled, and it will. It's just going to happen at the time that he says. Now, all of that being said, I still firmly believe that we are in the seasons for things to take place according to the scriptures. And of course, we're still waiting to see how these things are going to play out, because that's one thing nobody knows for sure as to how things are going to play out. But the sure thing we do know is that things will play out, because that's what the scriptures say. And so I want to look at another piece of scripture which is very common, that we've covered on many occasions before, and that is just to see what we were reminded to do during this time, because there was a reminder that we were given, and it was a multiple reminder. It happened on multiple occasions, but we were given this specific reminder in order for us to really have instruction and know what we should be doing during this time as we await for the Most High's promises to be fulfilled. And I'm going to read from the book of Luke chapter 21. I will start in verse 34 just for context, where it says, "And take heed to yourself." This is obviously Yahusha speaking. He says, "Take heed to yourself, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and the cares of this life, so that day come upon you unawares. For as a snare it shall come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth." Now here is the key scripture. These are the two things he tells us to do. He says, watch, number one, ye therefore, and pray, number two, always, that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. So he is telling us to do two things continually. He's telling us, number one, to watch. And he's telling us, number two, to pray always. These are instructions we are given for these end times. Because he goes on to say that these things are needed so that you can be accounted worthy to escape all the things that shall come to pass and to stand in front of Yahusha. We have to be found worthy, and we can only be found worthy if we watch and pray always according to what Yahusha has said. And so if something like the second Exodus was to occur tomorrow, how many of us are in that state where we are watching and we are praying always? How many of us would be found worthy? And sometimes you have to ask yourself these questions, that when things don't pan out the way you think or at the timing that you think, could that be a blessing in disguise? Could that be because we collectively as a body are not ready? Or could that be because we individually are not ready in our own personal walks? Because we have to be found worthy, as he says, to escape all these things that will come to pass and to stand in front of the Son of Man. So in order for us to be in that position, what I believe is happening is the Most High is giving us time to prepare, time to have these individual relationships with him, not via a pastor or not via a teacher. And again, I want to stress, there's nothing wrong with having a pastor that you listen to or a teacher that you follow, or listen to their teachings and learn from them and are encouraged and edified from them. Those are all good things, and we all need that. Every individual needs that. We all need edification. We all need to be built up and to be encouraged, and for our spirit man to respond. But all of that being said, the most important thing anybody can do is have that individual relationship with the Most High. As the scripture says, that we should work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. And what work for your salvation, but work it out. In other words, understand how you are saved. Understand that your salvation is an individual thing that the Most High gives to anybody whosoever will. And so for us to have this understanding, we surely must be in a position where we have this individual relationship with the Most High. And sometimes these things have to be attained by silence in the community. Be still and know that Yah is Yah. These are the things what we should be understanding and striving for during a time that may seem dormant. So I just wanted to encourage you with those few words, that everything is well, that the Most High is still the Most High, that he never changes, and that he hasn't forgotten anybody, and that he is keeping us. He is always good. Good is his nature, and no matter how it may seem on the surface, things are still taking place and will take place at their appropriate time. But let's be encouraged that the Most High hasn't forgotten any of his children, and that he is still seeking those individual bonds and individual relationships with us, as well as collectively. Because when we have an individual relationship, then we can come together collectively as a nation, as a people, and be tied in with the Most High as a gathering as to all the things that we are looking for. And so we need to continue striving for this. Now, as I already said, we're entering into a new season in terms of, from a climate perspective, where we will transition out of the hotter months into the cooler months for some of us in the western part of the world, and in other parts of the world where we know that the true nation is, they're also entering into a season which will determine how things go. And so we need to be very understanding of these things and very sensitive to these things, because when the seasons change, that's usually when things happen. And so even when we talk about the feast season and going through things like Passover and unleavened bread and Pentecost and first fruits, and transitioning later on into the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles and the eighth great day, we will see that these things will have a greater significance at their appointed time during the season that they are coming up in, which will be in the fall season for us that are in these Western Babylonian nations. And so many things are set up to take place. I talked already briefly at the beginning about things like politics, things like wars and rumors of wars, and the economy, and all these things, that so many things are happening on the circuit. Far too many for me to cover on this short video. But like Yahusha said, we should be watching and praying always that we may be accounted worthy to escape. Remember, he's talking about an escape. What does escape mean? Escape means that we are going to be in a place that the Most High brings us to get away, to escape all the things that are going to come to pass. And if you read the whole of Luke chapter 21 or Matthew chapter 24 or Mark chapter 13, all the things he's talking about are the things described prior. All the rumors of wars and all the things that we know are going to take place laid out in the book of Revelation. And so he's given us clear instruction to watch and to pray always. And these things are what is going to account us worthy. Because in our own physical strength, with our own knowledge and understanding, with our own efforts and our own good deeds and the things that we may think are good, all of these things are not going to be what makes us worthy to escape. The only thing that's going to make us worthy to escape is our relationship with the Most High. And that relationship comes through watching and praying always, staying on job. And so I want to end with one last scripture which backs up perfectly Yahusha's words, found in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and I will start from verse 16, where it says, "Rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of Elohim in Yahusha Messiah concerning you. Quench not the spirit, despise not prophesying, prove all things, and hold fast that which is good." So again, we see in verse 17 that we are told to pray without ceasing. Now I want you to think about this for a moment. This scripture is maybe seen as metaphoric, because how can someone pray without ceasing? How do you pray when you're asleep? How do you pray when you're having a conversation? How do you pray with when you're at work, doing your day-to-day work? How do you pray at the time? It's saying pray without ceasing. In other words, pray without stopping. Continually pray 24/7, 365 or 364. How do you do these things continually without ceasing? So it may be seen that the word is metaphoric in this particular example. And I believe that there is a metaphor to it. In other words, pray without ceasing means just pray a lot, pray as much as you can. But I also believe that there's a degree of being literal. There's a literalism in this particular scripture, because the word is purified 7 times and the word cannot lie. So it can't give you a half truth, i.e. give you something that may be seen as a metaphor or a hyperbole, but it's actually literal as well. It has to cover both sides. So when he says pray without ceasing, yes, there's a hyperbole or a metaphor to it, but I believe it's also literal. And the literal part is what we need to understand what that means. How can one continually pray even in their sleep, even when they're eating, even when they are communicating with other people? How can one continually pray? Of course, it's referring to the spirit man, or the ruach that dwells in you, because the ruach that dwells in you is what is going to do these things on your behalf when you feed the ruach. And that's why when you continue on in this scripture, in verse 19, it says, quench not the ruach, because the ruach in you can be quenched. In other words, it can become dormant if you don't feed it. And you feed the Ruach through reading the word, through praying to the Most High, through seeking Him out, through meditation, and through proving all things, which is obviously through the word, and holding fast to that which is good. So these things, these tools that the Ruach gives us, enables the Ruach to be active. So even when we are asleep, the Ruach is working with us internally, praying on our behalf. Even when we are eating, even when we're talking to somebody else, if we're feeding the Ruach, then the Ruach will constantly be praying on our behalf. And that's why Yahusha said to watch and to pray always. Because yes, he's talking about the prayer that we're conscious of when we get on our knees or when we go in our prayer closets and pray to the Most High. Yes, he's talking about that, but he's also talking about the Ruach that should dwell in you once you have been converted, that we should be feeding that Ruach. So even when we are inactive, that Ruach is still on our behalf, talking to the Most High and feeding our Ruach with his goodness. And that's the purpose of having the Ruach in you. And so it's so important that we develop these personal relationships during a time where we may feel that there is silence, because even though you don't see things happening, doesn't mean that they're not happening. I always like to use the analogy of planting a seed in the soil and giving it water and giving it time. And after a certain period of time, you see no activity, because you're looking on the surface, you're looking for it to sprout up, you're looking for it to start growing. You see nothing. But if you were to go underneath that soil, you will see that the roots have taken place. You will see that there has been activity and that seed is starting to grow. And then at the appointed and appropriate time, you will see it start to shoot up, and you will see a plant produce, or a flower produce, or a tree produce, or fruit produce. And that is how the seed will work. It's not always what you can see, it's what you can't see where the process starts, and then the full thing comes to fruition. And so it will be with the end time prophecies and the things that are written. The scriptures have to be fulfilled, and they will. The Most High is letting things play out exactly as he wants at the appointed and appropriate time. And that's when we will see the things that we are looking towards. So when we don't see activity on the surface or from our naked eye, or what we perceive to be the activity of the things that are written, let's not fall asleep. Let's not be deceived. Things are still going on. And all we have to do, as Yahusha told us very wisely, is to watch and pray always, that we may be accounted worthy to escape all these things. So Yahasharal, I will leave it here. I will come back to you, if you be willing, in the near future with one or two other teachings just on things we can do during this season and things that we can learn that will help us. But all of that being said, we are entering into a new season, as we are in terms of the climate and the times that we're in. And I believe there will be a correlation to the things that we will see in this new season, things happening around the world, which will relate the things of scripture to be fulfilled. So we should look out for those things and stay close to the Most High. As the Most High told the prophet Moshe to tell Aaron and the people, I leave you with these words to all of those that are his. May Yah bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift his countenance upon you, and may he give you shalom.